Well, greetings and salutations, and welcome once again to the Newsman Weekly Podcast, episode number 25, if my math is accurate. And quite frankly, folks, once I get above 10 and I have to take my shoes off to count, it gets a little bit harder when you get to be my age. My thanks to all of you for joining us once again. This audience grows by leaps and bounds each and every week. Well, by small leaps and bounds anyway. But hey, thanks once again to local country singer Luke Watson for crafting this show's theme song. I got to tell you, folks, we're just a couple of weeks away from Christmas, and I am as jolly as ever. We put the lights and ornaments on our Christmas tree this weekend. If that doesn't put the Christmas spirit into you, I don't know what will. Just in case that didn't work, I stopped at the liquor store for a new bottle of 1792 bourbon. Now that is guaranteed Christmas spirit. Christmas in a bottle. Today, I'm once again joined by Zach Heiser, the executive producer of the Newsman Weekly. Welcome back, Zach. How was your weekend? What did you do for fun? And I saw your Browns got slapped again on Sunday by the Steelers.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. They
watch the
played
NFL.
on Sunday.
I don't watch the NFL.
Yeah, I didn't even know the NFL was still a thing. I put up some Christmas lights outside. My tree's been up since before Halloween. And I drank some Four Roses bourbon this weekend.
Okay.
So cheers to you and Merry Christmas to everybody.
All right. Also back with us today is Knox Pages reporter Grant Ritchie, the show's still at this point official videographer. Richie, have you gone to visit Santa yet to tell him what you want for Christmas?
You know, I didn't, but if I did, I would ask him for the Cowboys to get rid of Jerry Jones and for us to make the Super Bowl next year. So, but that's what I would ask for.
Not even Santa can perform that kind of miracle. Also sitting in with us today is Hayden Gray, the Shelby reporter and also North County reporter for Richland Source. Hayden, talk to me about your weekend and how was your son getting ready for Christmas?
It was a good weekend. No bourbon drinking on my part this weekend, so sorry about that. But we got in Christmas spirit. Went over to Christmas in the Village on Saturday in Plymouth. It was a good time. Santa was not there.
Wait, they had a Christmas in the Village sans Santa.
Well, he wasn't there when I was there, and so I mean,
did you promise your son he was going to get to see Santa?
I said he might see. He did see a Minion.
Minion. There
was a character appearance from the Minions. So for all intents and purposes, right now that could be Santa for him. He doesn't know. I could have told him it was Santa. And it wouldn't have he's 1 year old for everyone listening, but so no, he didn't get to see Santa yet. But we'll find him.
How do you sit on a Minion's lap? I don't think the Minions have laps.
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I don't know if they can even sit. Right.
All right, folks. Just before we get too much further along, just wanted to point out that Jack Link's is the official beef jerky of the Newsman Weekly podcast. So please support those who support us and get yourself a bag of Jack Link's beef jerky originals today, made with 100% real beef. So
Jack Link's don't contact us.
Oh, they'll be thrilled. They'll be thrilled that they have made the show today. And we have got a hell of a show for you again today. We have an in-house list of Source Media stars to keep you informed on what's happening across North Central Ohio. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Ashland Source reporters Dillon Carr and Mariah Thomas. Those two have been working on a project to report how Ashland has spent its share of American Rescue Plan Act dollars. You can check out ashlandsource.com to read their work, and you're also invited to a meeting Wednesday night at 7 at the Ashland Theater, during which they will lead a panel discussion on how that money was used and why.
It's more of an event. I mean, call it a meeting.
It's an event.
Yeah. Drop the boring label, Carl. People need to go. They need to hear how money was spent. It's important.
Folks, I'm going to be there. It is now officially an event. That's all you need to know. I'm going to drive over to Ashland Wednesday night. We're also going to be joined. Hayden's going to stick around with us, and we're also going to be joined by Richland Source Managing Editor Larry Phillips, and we're going to have a damn lively chat about the upcoming college football playoff. 12-team bracket was announced Sunday afternoon. Number 8 seed Ohio State will face number 9 seed Tennessee in the first round in a night game at Ohio Stadium. Nobody knows Ohio State football like Larry. I'm certain he'll provide us with insights on the Buckeye chances at a national title. and we'll let Hayden speak a few words along the way as well.
If you like government spending and college football, this is the episode for you.
Now, if you'd like to see more government spending on college football, we could do that.
We might need to
do
that. Yep.
Yeah, we could do that. Anyway, all of that's coming up, but right now, let's get to some news. A Shelby man was shot and killed during an altercation with police on Saturday night at an Arby's fast food restaurant at 234 Mansfield Avenue. According to Shelby Police Chief Lance Combs, 2 officers went to the restaurant at 11:18 p.m. to serve a failure to appear warrant from Shelby Municipal Court on Tyler S. Jacobs, age 31. After making contact with Jacobs, telling him about the warrant, Jacobs suddenly stabbed Sergeant Noah Coker, 25, in the neck with a knife. Coker, a military veteran, was able to back away from Jacobs. He then ran towards Coker with the knife still in his hand. Coker drew his gun, fired several times, striking Jacobs. Another officer, Dominic Ewing, 24, had been positioned at the restaurant's back door. He immediately entered, according to Combs, and provided medical aid to both. Coker and Jacobs were transported to Ohio Health Mansfield Hospital by the Shelby Fire Department. As of Sunday afternoon, Combs said Coker was in stable condition. Jacobs sadly died during surgery, the chief said. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation was requested by the Shelby Police Department to investigate the officer-involved shooting and to process the scene. Really bad time for anything. But I know one of the things I've heard from police officers over the years is that people armed with knives are just as dangerous as people armed with guns. I watched the body cam video that I think Hayden helped Brittany Schock put up yesterday on the website, and that knife literally comes out of nowhere. They had spoken about 2 words to each other. I think the officer said, "I have a warrant for your arrest." He said, "For what?" And next thing you know, he stabs him in the neck. So very unfortunate situation up in Shelby over the weekend. Next news, a multi-pronged City of Mansfield lawsuit against the Lucas Company that demolished the former YMCA has now been reduced to a simple breach of contract dispute. Visiting Common Pleas Court Judge Christopher Collier, who's retired from Medina County, on Tuesday dismissed several causes of action against Page Excavating, including the city's attempt to claim fraud and misrepresentation by the company, and also its attempt to seek individual damages from Jeff and Londa Page, owners of the company. The 3 claims that remain unresolved all revolve around the wording found in the contract itself that was signed back in September of 2018 during the previous administration of Mayor Tim Thaker and then Law Director John Spahn. In a 13-page ruling, Collier said the city's complaint, quote, is at best ambiguous as to what Page Excavating could and could not bury at the project site and what they were not required to remove. The judge also found issues with the contract itself. He said, quote, at least one portion of the contract provides that all demolished material needs to be removed from the project site, while another portion of the contract allowed Page Excavating to bury demolished materials. So, he did note the city's complaint alleges entire structures of the former building were undemolished and simply covered up and buried, including the entire locker rooms and portions of the basement. The judge said in that regard, both the meaning of the contract and Page Excavating's performance are questions of fact that cannot be resolved at the pleading stage. Accordingly, the court finds the city can prove a set of facts that would entitle it to relief for breach of contract and breach of warranty against Page Excavating. Those 3 remaining claims are set for a jury trial on July 14th, though Collier's ruling granted attorneys for Page Excavating 14 days to file a response to his decision regarding those 3 causes of action. So that will still be going on for a while yet.
Yeah, lots to dig through. Sorry.
Yeah.
Did
you literally say lots to dig through?
I was waiting to say that. Yeah, I'm glad you're reporting on it, Carl.
Yeah, I need some kind of sound that goes wah wah.
That was good.
For that kind of a
Go ahead,
thing.
Zach.
Oh, what do you think's next for that site? I mean, it's going to sit there for a while until this is all resolved. Right?
No, the site itself is actually owned by the Richland County Land Bank.
Okay.
They've pretty much finished digging it all out and restoring it back in. I know the land bank is working with a company out of Columbus who's putting together models of what it could look like in terms of potential mixed use, maybe retail, maybe apartments, that kind of stuff. So no, the land bank owns the property. They took possession not long after the demolition was complete, and they are still in the efforts of trying to market it. So that project will continue even as the lawsuit continues.
It's got to deal with the buried locker room.
Well, yeah, that's all gone. They literally had to go dig all that stuff up.
They did dig it up already then. Okay. Wow.
The city spent almost $500,000 on the original demolition. They put in another $600,000 to help dig all that stuff up and remove it. Because the problem was the land bank was trying to market it, but the companies that were looking at it said, no, there's like stuff sticking up out of the ground. This isn't good. Yeah. So they had a company do like a sonic ground radar test, and they're like, holy thunder, there's a whole bunch of crap down here. So they literally had to hire a company from Macomb to come down and re-dig it all up again and then pull out. That's when they found the swimming pool, the lockers.
Wow.
Everything was just kind of buried down at the bottom. But it's going to be up to a jury to decide at this point what exactly that contract meant.
Mm-hmm.
Mansfield City Council First Ward Representative Laura Burns told me last week she believes residents should have a council member able to give them 100%. Still suffering from the impacts of a horrific ice skating accident in New York City in December of last year, Burns told me she will not seek re-election to council in 2025. She said she's really struggled with it for a while because if there's anything she's enjoyed, it's been working with Mayor Jody Perry's administration. She said, quote, it's been difficult keeping legislation straight, being able to speak clearly in meetings, maintaining my focus and my memory. It's just hard. She fell while skating on the famous rink at Rockefeller Center. Some folks jumped down from like a bench or whatever goes around the rink, landed in front of her. She ended up suffering broken bones in her skull and bleeding in her brain. She said she made her decision not to seek re-election over the last few months, consulting with her husband and her children. She said, quote, the person that ran for re-election almost 4 years ago is not the same person who would be running in 2025. I know there's a saying out there that on the days you only have 30% to give and you give 30%, that you actually gave 100%. I get that, and it's nice to say, but the reality is I can't give the people in the First Ward what they deserve. So she has decided not to seek re-election to another 4-year term. So I will tell you, I've first covered a Mansfield City Council meeting back in 1990. I've seen a lot of City Council people come and go over the years. Laura Burns has been an excellent member of City Council for the First Ward. If you didn't know that she had that accident, you wouldn't know by watching her when she's active in meetings. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be a shame that Laura will not be on council after next year. So best of luck to Laura Burns. And she's still got another year to serve. She'll serve all of 2025, but she will not be on the primary ballot in May or the general election ballot next November.
So her position will be up for election?
Will be up. There's already a couple of Republicans who have taken out petitions to run for the ward. We'll wait and see if there's some Democrats that want to get involved as well. Finally, I am happy to announce Matthew Failer is headed back across Alaska in 2025.
Right, Matt.
The Mansfield native will launch his 14th Iditarod effort when what's been dubbed the last great American race begins its 53rd campaign with a ceremonial start in Anchorage on March 1st. The 42-year-old Failer made it official on Monday when he entered the annual nearly 1,000-mile race from Anchorage to Nome with his 17th dog Iditarod team that is based out of his home in Willow, Alaska, which is about an hour's drive from Anchorage. During an interview with Matthew Failer that we hosted after last year's race, the 2000 St. Peter's High School graduate said he was actually considering taking a year away. He said, quote, we're pretty sure I'm probably going to sit it out, but that's not set in stone. Well, apparently it wasn't set in stone at all, so Matt is getting in.
Did you talk to Matt? Did he give a reason why he's back in it?
We haven't done that interview yet. I did run into Matt at the Lexington West Holmes basketball game Friday night. He was there for the JV game, he and his family, and I got to see his wife and his son. His son is growing like a weed. He was very quiet, his son, until I said, "Are you ready for Christmas?" And then he got a big smile and said, "Yes."
Theo, right?
Yeah, Theo. And apparently Theo has probably been to see Santa, and he doesn't mistake him for a minion. But
He's got one up.
I didn't get to talk to Matt for a long time, but he's definitely excited about doing the race again. I think it's going to be a wonderful race. We're working on plans to try to find the best way to cover this year's race. I know that many folks loved following Matt on the trail last year through our coverage in Richland Source. We hope to improve on that again this year. Maybe we'll see, I don't know, some boots on the ground in Alaska.
Ooh.
Stay tuned for more on that.
You're going to have to get some boots.
Well, I'm wearing my boat shoes.
No,
I might wear socks.
That's not going to work.
Die.
Well, it's cold, but
you won't have feet anymore.
You can't just go up to Alaska in your Richland Source jacket and your boat shoes.
Don't tempt me. I might, but yeah, we are actively entertaining thoughts on how we might be able to do something with that. So please stay tuned. All right, that's enough news for now. We got a lot of show coming up, so let's take a quick break. In a few minutes, we'll be joined by Ashland Source reporters Dillon Carr and Mariah Thomas to talk all things ARPA in Ashland County. Please stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Newsman Weekly. With us now are Dillon Carr and Mariah Thomas, reporters at the Ashland Source. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining us. And Mariah, what is that big blue thing?
It's a butterfly keychain.
Of course it's a butterfly keychain, and you just happened to bring that in on a day that we're filming a podcast. Would you like to show the audience the big blue butterfly keychain? Go ahead.
I'd love nothing more.
Okay.
Is it over here?
Now,
to your left.
Yeah.
To my left?
To your left, yeah. Now, what is the significance of the big blue butterfly keychain?
A friend and I found them at Joanne's.
Okay, so it's not like you went in looking for a big blue butterfly keychain.
No, it found me.
Okay, well, okay. All right, let's get on with this. Folks, Ashland County got $46.6 million in federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act since Congress passed that legislation and President Biden signed it back in 2021. As someone who covers a little bit of ARPA in Richland County, it's not always easy to track how this money has been spent. I think you guys have done a great job of detailing that in Ashland County. For those not familiar with ARPA, the $1.9 trillion with a T, not a B, not an M, a trillion, $1.9 trillion spending plan had several stated goals. It wanted to assist local governments, businesses, educational institutions, and residents coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But Dillon, I think this project started with you, included some financial backing to help make it happen.
Yes.
What was your original idea behind this project, and tell us how you found and obtained grant funding to make it happen.
Okay, well, I joined on this like a webinar series from the Pointer Institute because I thought, the topics look pretty interesting. They were talking about immigration. They were talking about LGBTQ plus issues, just you name it. They were talking about the issues and inviting journalists from across the country to join in to learn about tips and tricks of covering those different topics and issues, giving us access to databases that we've never heard of, professionals who would be able to mentor us, and just it was just a resource for professional journalists. So I joined it. It was called Beat Academy, and one of the topics was the American Rescue Plan Act, and how this money was spent and how to track it, and again, plugging us into experts that have been looking at this bill and this money for a couple of years. And so during this webinar, at the end it said, hey, and by the way, if you're interested in doing this and tracking it, we've got $10,000 available to journalists who want to apply for this money. If you have an idea of how specifically you want to cover this, then apply and we'll get back to you. And they were looking for journalists. Oh, I just messed with my...
I can still hear you. Can you hear?
It was like fuzzy in my ears.
That's because Heiser's messing things up again. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. It's okay.
Turns the fuzz up.
I think I'm
Keep
back.
your hands off the wires.
I'm a fidgeter.
That's why you've got to
can
bring
fidget
in
with
your
my
own
butterfly.
toys.
Yes,
The butterfly
that's
keychain
okay.
and the slinky. They
I'll
keep
just-
you from jiggling with the wires.
Clutch my phone. All right.
We're back.
We're back.
We never left.
So they were looking for reporters and journalists from like the Midwest region, like Minnesota, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. And they said, if you are in this region, we'd like to. We're focusing on you guys. So
Did they say why the Midwest?
they didn't.
Is it because it's like, the Rust Belt and you guys really never have money, so let's see what happens when
I
you
hope
get
it's
some?
something like that.
Yeah.
I hope so.
The coastal elites just treat us like zoo animals.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Oh, look.
Let's find out what they think.
Wow, we're getting
look at
spicy bright
that.
and early this morning.
Yeah, no, it that's good. I mean, I hope it was something simple like that.
And when was all this? When did you go through this seminar? When did you apply for the grant?
This was back in March,
Okay.
and then I found out that I received it in April. They actually, it was like I put it together and thought, this probably won't happen. It's the Poynter Institute. Like, this is a national thing. They're looking for lots of different journalists, and I don't think I'm going to make it, but whatever. I tried. My original idea for the story, by the way, it was very narrow. It was looking at Ashland, the city, and how they spent this money and how specifically it affected disadvantaged people, because that was another thing that they wanted to look at, is how did this money affect people who really needed it or touch the lives of people who really needed it. And so in Ashland, there's a kind of an unspoken but clear delineation economically in the south part of Ashland. So everything south of like Main Street, the house values are much more. There's more home ownership. The roads are in a bit better shape, and then everything north of Main Street, it's just there's a difference. And covering the city for a few years now, I've been able to kind of see this distinction and report a little bit about it. And so I thought it'd be interesting to look at that to see how much money was spent specifically in that geographic part of the city versus in the south. And in the early part of the reporting process, I found that all of the money was spent in the south part of the city. And as time went on, they eventually spent some money on the northern side with the Pump House District. And that's a development that is coming into town with market rate apartments and some commercial spaces. So when I found out that they were actually spreading the money around a little more than I thought, I was like, I wonder where else this money went and how much specifically came to Ashland County. And so that's why I started looking across the county. So this series kind of grew. Typically you start with a big idea and you kind of narrow it down. This one was reverse, but
Now, I know that good investigative reporters like to really dig into these kinds of projects when they have the time to do them. When I was younger and I had more brain cells, I like to do that kind of stuff. Now that I'm older, not so much. But how did the two of you manage to find the time to do this kind of enterprise reporting on top of the day-to-day stuff that you also have to cover? And going out buying big blue butterfly.
Well, let's just
I'm never going to live this down.
No.
let's just be 100% clear. We don't have the time to do
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Took the words out of my mouth. I mean, we are kind of chickens with our heads cut off on a day-to-day, I would say.
You are
Speak for
down with the
yourself.
visuals today.
I mean,
Have you ever actually seen a chicken after its head gets cut off?
why would I have seen that?
Well, I have.
That's really horrifying.
My grandmother.
It's
I don't
chaotic.
I don't think I'd ever want it. It's very unhinged.
Traumatic.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway.
You don't have time, but yet you found the time. So talk about that.
I was gonna say I think that it's a matter of juggling a lot to be a local journalist. Obviously, we have, the whole community, and it's kind of split between the two of us, and we have our beats, but, there's still events happening, and there's still, feature stories that need to be told. We've been at the fair as we've been doing this. When Dillon started on this project and first asked me to tap in, I was still in the throes of Tomorrow's Talent, which we talked with the listeners of this podcast about a couple of months back. And all of that takes, like you said, a lot of time and a lot of dedication and a lot of long hours. So
Yeah.
Dillon, from your standpoint, you've been at this even longer than Mariah. What kind of is a typical? Do you say the week starts and you say, okay, I know I've got to do this, this, and this, and in between I can fill in all this other stuff? How do you schedule yourself that way?
A few things that were paramount. Excuse me. I'd say the first one is the support of the people that edit and the people that support us in our jobs, like, Larry Phillips and Brittany and even Zach, the people that are kind of behind the scenes. But it starts with Larry saying, hey, you can do this, go do what you have to do for this, and we'll figure it out as we go. So that support, I think, is necessary, but then also it became very clear early on that I'm going to have to figure out how to be organized and stay organized. So I relied heavily on Google Sheets. I made a lot of tables and charts for myself, even that weren't published. Just a huge table that kind of showed me, here's how much. It was like a master sort of blueprint, how much each community received, when did I submit this public records request, did they respond, and if so, when, is a follow required, here's their phone numbers and emails. That was all on the same chart, and that really helped me see everything ahead of time. And so then it became necessary to kind of break up the series in, I've been calling them arms, different pieces, and so we tackled it in a way that was achievable in bite-sized pieces. So that's organization and support, boil it down.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was going to add one more thing. I remember Dillon shared that spreadsheet with me. Again, it was really, this whole thing he's been the mastermind behind it. And I remember when he shared that Google Sheet with me, it was almost overwhelming to look at just the amount of work that he had put into this whole thing over the course of all of these months. It's just, it's been a labor of love for sure.
Now, one of the things I know about a couple of years of covering government loves to spend money, okay, at every level, federal, state, local. They love to spend money. They don't like so much talking about how they spent that money. What sort of reaction did you get from mayors, county commissioners, school superintendents, when all of a sudden you're sending them public records requests saying, oh, how'd you spend this money? What did you use it for? Where did it all go? What was the initial reaction like?
The reactions kind of fell into categories. Some of them were very upfront about it. They were willing to talk. One person that comes to mind right away is Kyle Klingler, the treasurer from the Ashland City Schools. I spent, I don't know how long, on the phone with him for a few days in July, because I didn't really know what I was looking for and how to ask for it. So I told him, here's what I want to do. how do I get that information and what do I ask for? And so he really helped kind of going back and forth. And even when he gave me the information in raw form, I said, help me understand this. Like, can you like break it down in a way that makes sense in my mind? And so, yeah, that back and forth and the willingness to do that was huge. And so that kind of set the, I knew what to ask for after that interaction. It took a while to get there with him, but then once that happened, moving forward with the public schools, we were able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then, let's see, and then another category were people who just didn't respond. I still haven't heard from trustees or the fiscal officer in Orange Township. Mm-hmm. I had to rely on a trustee who told me what they did with the money or what they planned with it. I don't have any public records to look back on. And so that was one way that people responded. And then I think once people understood, this was a project that was meant to show people just where the money was spent, they were fine with it. They would give me the records, and then I would go and meet with them and go over each line item so I understood. And there were some surprising things that came out of that, but there were, by and large, pretty straightforward.
So there wasn't any major pushback from anybody you talked to?
No.
Just silence at most. Yeah.
Most of them just didn't say much.
Okay. Yeah. Fiscal Township, Orange Township Fiscal Officer, you are on the clock.
Mm-hmm.
You have yet to comply with a valid public records request. Don't make us get the Ohio Attorney General involved. There you go. All right, Mariah, you were going to say.
Oh, I was just gonna add to what Dillon had said, that I did have to have a couple of conversations that were kind of along the lines of why are you dredging this back up? COVID was a really hard time. It's
right.
Why are we going back and trying to remember this? And it was this is explaining. This is about accountability.
Mm-hmm.
You guys received this money, and
what did you do?
It was spent.
Now there were some issues. We ran into issues with Ashland University, and that's because they're a private institution. Mm-hmm. They are under no obligation from the law to provide us with financial records. It's that's just the way it is.
Right.
But they did eventually give us information. It kind of trickled in. We had to kind of do that back and forth dance for a little while, like I did with Kyle Klingler. And then Ashland County Community Academy, it took forever for them to respond to our public records request. And we had to have Larry Phillips, our managing editor, send in an email saying, hey, if you don't reply, we will, like you said, use the law.
Yeah.
And then 15 minutes later, he had all of the information in.
Isn't that funny?
But yeah, I will say for the most part, at least with the schools, it was a fairly simple matter to get the K-12 districts, that is, to get them to send in their records, and for most of them to answer questions from us as well.
Another thing too that we learned was be very clear about what it is you're asking for. Mm-hmm. Because I sent the same email to 20-some governments, villages, townships in the city, and almost all of their responses were different. And so I had to kind of go back and forth with a lot of them and say, I want this, not this, Mm-hmm. And so that took a lot of time.
Now, Mariah, you focus your efforts, I think, on kind of the educational side of ARPA. The ARPA stories that I've done more surfacey and around here have been involved with the city of Mansfield and the Richland County Board of Commissioners. But how different does ARPA look from an educational point of view? And what's some of the biggest things you saw school districts use these funds for in the last few years?
Well, to be really clear, I mean, my involvement in this project was really just more in a support role. So I did jump in and I did do, those public records requests for all of the K-12 districts and all of that kind of a thing. But again, like, all credit goes to Dillon.
Don't denigrate your.
You guys are both being way too humble.
I can't say it enough.
You're a reporter. You did
okay. I'll take the credit for it. Thanks, guys.
I'm sorry.
I just replace all our bylines.
Being clear. But I will say, so I don't know that I'm overly equipped to speak about how different the schools are than, the city necessarily, just because I wasn't the one who was knee deep in the public records requests that Dillon got from the city. So I've read his reporting, but don't necessarily have that side by side on my own. What I can tell you is that the schools, it was really interesting because they had these CCIP reports and they had to submit.
Okay, we're in a no acronym zone. Yeah. Do not ever say CCIP again.
Essentially, they were these reports that the schools had to submit, and they were like proposals for how the schools wanted to spend their money. And then they had to report how they actually spent it. So we could see, how they proposed to spend it, what they were aiming to spend it on, formulate questions around that, and then see, did this actually line up? For the most part, it did. There were kind of 5 main categories that schools spent money on, which was capital outlay, so big construction projects. That was the largest category. And then they had these grants for special education and homeless students specifically that they spent money on. They had, my brain is
so staff and salaries,
staffing and salaries,
purchase
services. So there were kind of those 5 big umbrellas that schools spent money on, and there was a lot that fell under all of those umbrellas. I mean, it was curriculum, it was materials, sanitation supplies for COVID. We had quite a few schools that built things. Black River Local Schools, for example, they built 12 modular classrooms to kind of help them get through the pandemic that they still use to teach classes today. People use it to bring on new staff positions or maintain paraprofessionals in the schools. So, all of that money was really put to use.
Now, Dillon, one of the most interesting stories that I can remember in my conversations with you as you were working on all this came out of the village of Loudonville.
Yep.
And this was a village that actually used ARPA money to buy a house that people were currently living in.
Yeah.
Tell us about that story.
So they spent $47,000 of their American Rescue Plan Act allocation. I think they received, in total, between $200,000 and $300,000 from this money. And so a lot of that was spent on things like fixing up their village town hall building. They have all of their meetings and offices in the Ohio Theater in Loudonville, and that building is pretty old, so they used a lot of it to fix it up. They used some of it to, I think they bought video cameras and surveillance video equipment for their sewer plant. So it was spread out pretty evenly. But then they came to this line item, and it was just an address. And I was like, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, that's a house that we council wanted to buy." I was like, "Oh, tell me more about that." And so kind of the information kind of trickled in, and I said, "Hey, this is a bit of a, all the other purchases make sense. But this is a little bit of a red flag for me as a reporter. Can we talk frankly here? What is this?" And they seemed a little bit nervous to talk about it because I think they knew that it was a bit of a touchy subject. But there were 5 people living in this house, and I think they're still living in the house. And they've been in there for years, and so they're on a month-to-month sort of situation. They pay, and I'm gonna get the specific number wrong.
So now these 5 people were renting.
They were
this
renting,
house, so they didn't own it. So they were renting it. Okay.
They were tenants, and the owner of the house had passed away, and so it was being handled by the estate, and the person in that estate was a friend with a council member on the village, and this person knew that the village had kind of eyed this property for years as a good possibility for a parking lot because of its proximity to the village park where they play softball. They have like softball and baseball tournaments in the summer, and it's on a street that gets really sort of congested during that time, and so they thought this is a prime real estate for a parking lot to alleviate some of those issues. And so the estate friend approached a village councilman, I think during a fishing trip, and said, hey, we've got this property and we want to sell it. And so I think the agreed upon price was $100,000. And so council moved on it, and they drew up a purchase agreement, and some of that money was, or around half of that money was American Rescue Plan money. And so for a while it was like a little unclear when they were going to move out or find another place to live. The reality is that they were paying a very low rent. Like, I think it was like $600 something a month. And the cheapest similar housing situation was like $900 plus. And so this was going to displace them. And so even in the village of Loudonville, they couldn't find a place that was similar living arrangement with a similar price. And so they have until I think the end of January to move out.
So, yeah, when we talked about it, to me that was one of the most ironic things about all of this is this funding to help American citizens, especially the people who are underserved or maybe perhaps homeless. And in this case, we were actually buying a home and forcing people to move away if they can find a place to live.
Yeah.
Well, is the they have till January to move out? So is that a legal thing? Like, do you have to give them so much time, or is that just kind of what they decided, or what?
Yeah. So that's a good question, because under the law, any governmental subdivision that buys a property that they're going to rent, they must go through a bidding process. So let me try to draw up the scenario. Like, this whole deal would have gone to bid. The people that are living in the house would have had to bid on their rental agreement going forward. And so when there's bidders, the price goes up.
Right.
Whether it was going to be them or someone else, they were going to pay more than what they were paying now, for sure. And so, and the people that I talked to for this story, the council people, the mayor, they were all aware of how difficult of a situation this was, but they said, hey, it was going to go to the private market anyway. This estate was going to sell, and these people would have been displaced whether or not council moved in to buy it anyway. Mm-hmm. Now that council has this property in their possession, we are giving them as much time as is available within the law to find a place to live. So it's a hard reality for these people, but it would have happened at a much quicker pace had the village of Loudonville not stepped in.
But they don't really intend to rent that again. I mean, their plan is to take that house down and make it into a parking lot.
Yeah, they're going to demolish it and turn it into a parking lot. That's the plan.
Paradise.
I know,
took the
exactly.
words out of my mouth.
I know. It's like it's funny to like think about that piece of art that was done years ago and how it still applies today.
So, American Rescue Plan for everybody but you guys. you can get out.
Were you able to talk to the family?
I wasn't.
Like off the record at all?
No, not even off the record. It was disappointing. I knocked on their door a few times, called the number that I was able to find. Never heard back from them. So, I don't know how they feel about it, but I can imagine just that. They have kids, they've got roots in the village, so it's going to be really difficult to find a place that is at that price point.
Right. Now, Mariah, what is your Loudonville story? What's the most interesting thing you found when you were doing reporting on this?
When I was doing reporting in Loudonville?
No, just in ARPA.
Or just in general?
Or
What's your Loudonville story?
What's
if you'd
my
like to talk about anything in particular. I mean, you've got the big blue butterfly key ring. Do whatever you want to do.
I'm never going to live it down.
We've now become
It's
the
a Squishmallow.
big
It's a
blue
Squishmallow,
butterfly
Carl. Say
ring
Say
podcast.
Say Squishmallow.
Say it.
No,
Why?
I don't want to. Just, what did you want?
No. Anyway, back to ARPA from this tangent.
We're back.
We're back. I think for me, I'm really excited. My stories about Ashland University have yet to come out, but I think that those ones were probably the ones that I got most excited about. Just because I was a college student when all of this money came in.
Last year.
To give me some credit. A year and a half ago, Carl.
Okay, all right.
But I was a college student also when all of that ARPA money came through. And I actually went back in my own college account because Ashland University, as many universities across the country did, spent a really large chunk of their money on directly giving students emergency financial aid. And once that money went into students' hands, there is no way to track how students spent it. Which back when...
Not only was there no way to track it, there was no effort to track it. There was
These are like student
no
stimulus
oversight.
checks. That
Literally,
we got back
like
in the day.
I
Okay.
went back and I looked because I was curious. I was like, I remember getting this money. I wonder how much I got. And I went back in my account and I found how much money I received. It was like $1,300 over 2 installments from HERF 3, which was Direct American Rescue Plan Act money. And
Biden bucks.
I had
Biden.
to do nothing to report what I did with that money, nor did any student at Ashland University. And again, that's not through any fault of the university. It's the federal government did not require any kind of like oversight into how students spent that money. And I think that that's just a really interesting piece of all of this to me, that again, like with so many of these governmental entities, we could do that line by line by line item and see exactly how this money was spent. And
But when
at
it came
the university
to,
level,
what was it, like $9.5 million?
there was just nothing that anybody could really do to track
So
it.
if I was a student at Ashland University and they gave me ARPA money, I could just go pay off my bar tab.
Exactly.
Literally,
Man.
I spent it.
I went to college 40 years too late.
I'll tell you personally, I spent part of my ARPA money on a down payment for my car. I didn't have student debt. I was very lucky about that, and it was a way to kind of help me along in a different aspect of my financial journey. But again, like, I'm sure that there are students out there that could tell you a story of spending it on an Xbox
I
or
can
something
guarantee
like that.
you, had
You
it
can buy
been
a
me,
lot
I
of
can tell you a story.
Squishmallows.
Yeah, you buy whatever.
You
or
could
whatever
buy a
those
lot
are.
of Squishmallows. You could, yeah.
You like-
I could buy like
could fill a
100
room.
of these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, now you guys have a big event coming up Wednesday. I believe it's going to be at the Ashland Theater
Yes.
to kind of put a bow on this entire project, so to speak. So give us some details about what you've got planned and how people can attend and participate if they want to.
Yeah, so it'll be Wednesday, December 11th from 7 to 8:30 at the Ashland Theater on Center Street in I just about said Mansfield, in Ashland. And it's a free event, so all we ask is that you register online so that we can have a head count for how many people are coming, because we will have complimentary appetizers, hors d'oeuvres, some beverages like water and tea.
I might come anyway.
So yeah, we're just the night is going to be kind of split into 2 parts. The first part is just going to be Mariah and I kind of giving an overview of what we found, kind of like what we just did. And then the second part is, you want to...
We're going to have a panel discussion. Dillon got several local officials to agree to sit on a panel with us and to talk and answer questions from the public live about how they spent this money and what those impacts were. So, and add on if I'm missing anybody, but I know Ashland Mayor Matt Miller has committed to be there. Savannah Mayor Tom Cruzy will be there. Ashland City Schools will have representation, either their superintendent or treasurer, perhaps both, will be there. I'm trying to think.
Denny Biddle,
Denny
the commissioner.
Biddle, a county commissioner, will be on that panel. So, am I missing anybody?
You and I.
The two of us.
We're going to put ourselves up on the panel, too. So if people have questions of our work and what we did and how we did it, they can ask.
Well, I was going to ask, will you be taking any questions from the audience that night?
Yep.
We will.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll have the Slido that we used for those of you who were maybe tomorrow's talent
Slido.
fans will be coming back. So excited about that.
All right. Well, very good. Folks, you need to join us Wednesday night in Ashland. I'm actually going to be there, so I think you need to be there as well. 7 to 8:30, Ashland Theater. Learn about how all the various governmental entities and educational folks in Ashland used $44.6 million.
46.6.
46.6. I'm already off, but we're going to leave it at that for today. Thanks to both of you for coming into the podcast studio with us today to talk about this important project, and thank you, Mariah, for bringing the big blue butterfly keychain.
I'm so glad it was such a hit.
Yes. Well, it
And
was
we'll link
something.
to your reporting, all 17 stories that I counted so far.
Wow.
We'll link to that in the show notes. So please go check that out and read it. I've read it. Most of the stories. I haven't read all of them yet because they just keep coming. But it's really good stuff. Really, Ashland County is lucky to have this type of reporting.
Indeed.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll be joined by Richland Source Managing Editor Larry Phillips and Shelby North County reporter Hayden Gray to talk about Ohio State football and the 12-team college football playoff field that was announced on Sunday. Stay with us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, stand up and cheer for the Ohio University, which on Saturday afternoon knocked off the Preppies from Miami to win the first Mid-American Conference football title, taking it home to Athens for the first time since 1968.
As OU's coach said, men have walked on the moon
Yes.
since the last time.
Yes, but in very OU fashion, not only did he point out that men had not walked on the moon, within hours he was gone, headed off to the University of Charlotte on a new 5-year contract. Thank you, Coach Tim Albin. All right, folks, we are back, and yes, I did have to start the football segment by playing a song that Grant Ritchie knows all too well, having been in the Marching 110 at one point.
Great point.
Stand up and cheer.
101 bones.
Yep. So welcome back. Joining us now is Richland Source Managing Editor Larry Phillips.
And an OU grad also.
And an unabashed fan of the other Ohio State University, football anyway, and a harsh critic of current OSU coach Ryan Day, which we'll get into before we get done. Also joining us now is Shelby North County reporter Hayden Gray, who I forced to get out of bed at an ungodly hour to be in here with us. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with some good news. Ohio State is in the playoff, one of 12 teams still hoping for a national championship. The Buckeyes host Tennessee, the Volunteers, on December 21st in a night game at the Horseshoe. For those wondering, despite the fact these are two pretty historic football programs, they've only met one previous time. It was the 1996 Citrus Bowl, and that game featured Eddie George and Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning beat him 20-14.
Yes, he did. But, guys, has Ohio State ever played a home game this late into the season?
I don't think so. 102-year history of Ohio Stadium, and unless they played some kind of a charity game or something along those lines, I believe this will be the first December game, and it being a night game, it'll be interesting to see what kind of weather conditions we'll have in Columbus December 21st.
But I know it didn't take Josh Heupel, the Tennessee coach, very long. During his press conference Sunday, he quickly said, hey, we don't play in the Deep South. We're from, northern Tennessee. We're used to the cold. Weather won't be a factor. Hayden, you've been on high school sidelines lately when it's been pretty cold. Is the weather going to be a factor for the Volunteers when they come north?
I don't think so. I mean, we could say all we want about, I think if it was a team maybe like far more south, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think with all the different things they have, heated benches, all the big gas lamps and the heat blowers, I don't think it'll be that big of an issue. Plus, it's unpredictable in Ohio. I haven't looked that far ahead on a weather model or anything, but I don't think it's going to be that cold.
Also, that Hypo makes a good point. I think Knoxville's like 5 to 8 degrees warmer than Columbus. I mean, it's not. This is not a. If this is the Miami Hurricanes coming to town, that might be an issue we could talk about. But I think that's probably much ado about nothing.
Well, it could be helpful though to have like kind of a blizzard, big snow and that kind of
stuff.
See,
would that help the Buckeyes? I mean, with their inability to control the line of scrimmage or run the football, I don't think that'd help them.
All right. Well, Tennessee was 7-0 at home, just 2-2 on the road, 1-0 on a neutral field. Now, this is a program that plays at Georgia, at Alabama, at Florida, etc. Do you think they'll be at all intimidated coming into the Horseshoe to play the Buckeyes based upon who they play already?
No, not at all. I don't think Tennessee's a juggernaut this year, but no, they're not going to be intimidated by Ohio Stadium. If this was Boise State or SMU, that might be a little different, but Tennessee's not going to. They see more intimidating crowds at Death Valley, and you mentioned Georgia, a team they beat this year. Mm-hmm. So this is not a venue that's going to shake them.
Wait, I must have that wrong. I had Tennessee losing to Georgia.
You know what?
Year.
I'll double check on that. Maybe
they did.
My fault.
That was one of their two losses. But you're right. I mean, folks not familiar with.
They beat Kent State though.
Everybody
71-0.
Literally everybody beat Kent
didn't?
State this year. 0-12. Akron beat Kent State this year. That's
just notified our best wide receiver hit the transfer portal this morning.
You know what? He couldn't get out of town quick enough. There's no doubt about that.
My fault. You guys are right. Tennessee beat Alabama, not Georgia. I turned those two around. My fault.
The only reason I know that is because I wanted to see who they lost to when I was doing some show prep last night for this. And I don't know whether folks not familiar with Tennessee football. I mean, people talk about how big Ohio Stadium is and how many people it holds. Tennessee holds over 100,000 people in their stadium as well.
Neyland Stadium, yeah.
All right. This is a Tennessee team that posted a 10-2 record. They tied for second in the vaunted Southeastern Conference, tied with Georgia with a 6-2 league record. They did lose to Georgia, no shame in that. But they also lost 19-14 to an Arkansas team that went 6-6 and finished 11th in the conference. So is Tennessee just kind of like Ohio State, got a lot of talent but just inconsistent?
Well, you can make that comparison, but I think they're fairly similar to the Buckeyes from obviously a tradition standpoint. But in this situation, I think they're still learning to win. Tennessee hasn't won an SEC title in several years. Ohio State has been picked to win the Big Ten for how many years and hasn't won it in at least 4 years.
Yeah, we'll get to Ryan Day here.
But I think they're coming at it from two different perspectives. I think Tennessee's a program on the rise, and I'm not sure about Ohio State. I think they both suffered. I think Tennessee just had a bad game. I have no idea what happened in Columbus 2 weeks ago or a week ago. I'm sorry. That was just completely out of left field for me.
Well, I know that Tennessee's got a great running back, a kid named Dillon Sampson. I think he rushed for a net of 1,485 yards, 22 touchdowns. Not a huge kid, but a very productive running back. They got a great quarterback, and I'm going to mispronounce this kid's name, Nico Lamaliva.
I just call him
Nico.
Nico.
Close, yeah.
Who threw for 2,512 yards and 19 touchdowns. They have a pretty good defense. The only team to score more than 30 on them all year was Georgia. So what does Ohio State have to do, Hayden, when they take on the Volunteers and Josh Heupel? What does Ohio State have to do to win this game?
Well, we'll save anything to do with the coaching part of things for our dedicated conversation about Ryan Day. But on the field, we've got to use our weapons. I mean, we did not use Jeremiah Smith nearly enough in the regular season finale, and I don't know. They've just got to get Will Howard confident going early. I mean, they've got to get some easy completions and then get the ball moving. I don't know, keep it a little bit more up-tempo, try and put up points early, get the crowd into it. I mean, I know we haven't played a night game this late into the season probably ever, Larry was saying, but we've barely played any night games at all this year. And a home playoff game, that's something that they've never had. So hopefully the crowd will be a big factor, but I don't know, just use the weapons more efficiently.
Yeah, Kirk Herbstreit yesterday, when they asked him about Ohio State getting a home game, Herbstreit said, well, I'm not sure they wouldn't be better off going on the road.
He did.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
He said, because the first time they go 3 and out and they have to punt the ball, said this crowd's going to be booing.
Yeah.
They're going to be booing Ryan Day. So, now, Larry, what are your thoughts? What's Ohio State got to do? I mean, they've played good teams this year, even though they lost to Michigan, which was not a good team. They've played Oregon. They've played Indiana. They've played Penn State. With the exception of a 1-point loss to Oregon, they beat those other 2 teams. So they're capable, but what do they have to do this time?
Yeah, I go back a little bit to that ascendancy or descending theory, and Ohio State is not playing well right now, obviously. I think that's a concern for Ryan Day. I don't know how much to blame on execution and how much to blame on coaching. I usually don't like to get into play calling because I have no idea what play was called. Quarterback can make an audible. Who knows? But their play calling, even Joel Klatt called it out in the Michigan game, was just incredible. We saw things that you wouldn't see at the Pee Wee League, and I don't know if that's what hamstrung the kids or what. But Ohio State did not play to their level in the last week. You're right. They beat Penn State, which I think was their best win of the season, was at Penn State. I'm not a believer in Indiana. I think they caught lightning in a bottle, and they played, I think, one of the weakest schedules in Division I this year. You put Alabama and Indiana on a neutral field, and Alabama names a score on them. So I'm not a big fan of that
because
win.
He doesn't understand why he doesn't have a home game this week in the playoffs. So,
are you arguing that Bama should be in this field?
Well,
or are you arguing on behalf of
what?
SEC
And
team?
I get you. There's no bigger SEC hater in this room than me. But
SEC/ESPN.
But if you put them in a Vegas line, what's the line? I would say Alabama probably by double digits in a game against Indiana, and Indiana.
Right. I think Miami is the same thing. I mean, they were a powerhouse this year that lost a couple of games they shouldn't have lost late.
Yeah, but they lost to teams in the ACC. They lost to Syracuse.
So,
any Miami fan out there, here's what I'm going to tell you. You lost to Georgia Tech, and then
Bama lost to Georgia.
But you only
Georgia Tech took Georgia to 8 overtimes.
You only had to win one more game. You had to beat Syracuse. Okay, and I don't want to hear about Kyle McCord, throwing in 55 times a game and throwing for a zillion yards. If he was that good, he would have stayed in Columbus. Well, maybe not for Day, but we talk about execution, Larry. It reminded me back in, I think it was 1975, when John McKay was coaching at Tampa Bay, and they were so horrible. I mean, this is a team that were like 0-14 at least 1 year, if not 2. And a reporter asked him, "What do you think of your team's execution, coach?" And McKay said, "I'm in favor of it." So, I mean,
great coaching line.
Well, he also said something one day. He said, "Well, we can't win at home and we can't win on the road. What we need is a neutral site." So, now, if Ohio State does win, and I mean that's still a possibility.
Yeah. You know what? Right. Let's stop right there because I think we probably need to change the tenor. The Buckeyes are favored in this game, and they're at home.
You're favored by 7, I think, was the opening line.
And I don't think that line's out of place. I think Ohio State fans are looking at the draw that they got, and to win this thing, they would have to beat. Although there's a tremendous opportunity because if they do, Ryan Day can put to bed a lot of narratives in one fell swoop. But they would have to beat Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and probably Georgia. Yep. That is quite a juggernaut.
You know what? Again, I hate to keep saying this. We're going to postpone Ryan Day, Chad, for a minute. But if I'm Ryan Day and I win those 4 games, I'm dropping the mic. I'm going trousers down to people in Columbus and saying, "I'm the hell out of here." All right, you happy now? Yeah, I didn't beat Michigan, but look what I just did.
Yeah, that would put that narrative to bed. There's no question about it. But you were asking about Tennessee and talking about their attack. One thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned the quarterback, Nico. His last 4 games, he's hitting over 72% of his passes. And I think that speaks to the kind of football they're playing right now. And And Ohio State in their last game obviously was a train wreck. But I also see some similarities between Tennessee's defense and Michigan's defense. They got very good defensive tackles. They have better defensive ends than Michigan had. I think their defensive line is better than Michigan's. They have one very good corner that I'm sure will be on Jeremiah Smith most of the game, although that didn't really matter against Michigan since Ohio State decided not to throw to him, which I have no idea what that was about. But Tennessee can be had. They have the other side, the other corner is nowhere near as good as their best cornerback. Ohio State's going to have to throw the football. I do not see them running the ball on this team. They couldn't run the ball in Michigan. I don't think they're going to run the ball in Tennessee. But that's okay. Maybe that works to Ohio State's favor. If they're forced to throw the football, you're going to have to throw the football to win this game, then that means Ohio State gets to play with their best tools. Those are their best players. And they've got to take advantage of those matchups. And refusing to do that against Michigan is just coaching libel. That's all there is to it.
Is Ohio State going to get any of these offensive linemen back by the time they play this game? I know the center they got from Alabama, he's done.
He's scratched for the year.
Yeah, and so's the tackle.
Okay, so
he's already even declared for the NFL. So yeah,
well, that answers that probably.
They're not. No, those guys won't be coming back. And I think you're right, Carl. A lot of that was a lot was made of that. But again, I go back to Joe Cloud, who I think is a really excellent X's and O's guy for the average fan like me. To explain the run blocking scheme against Michigan and how much better the Buckeyes were at one philosophy compared to the other. And, maybe Ohio State will have gone to school on that. I don't know. I'm hoping that they're smart enough to at least recognize where they went wrong and try and correct it. But Tennessee's it's not going to be an easy out. This game's going to go into the fourth quarter. And we'll see what happens. I like this matchup. I think I don't think it necessarily favors Ohio State that dramatically, but I also think it gives them a chance to prove themselves a little bit. This is, if you're going to start an historic run, and believe me, this would be an historic run if they rip off these 4 straight. This is a good momentum game to get them going.
Well, one of the things, and I wasn't trying to offer Ohio State an excuse for having an injured offensive line, because and hear me, Ryan Day and others in Columbus, there is absolutely no damn excuse to not have a whole bunch of great offensive linemen playing at Ohio State. If you only recruited the state of Ohio, there are 6'7", 325-pound guys coming out of every orifice of the state of Ohio. Get a whole bunch of them. Quit spending all your money in $20 million on wide receivers and tight ends and quarterbacks or whatever. Get some linemen.
Trenches.
I mean, yeah, injuries happen, but there is no reason. And by the way, you got rid of a pretty good offensive line coach a few years ago. How's that worked out for you since then?
I think you make a really good point, Carl, in that, David Sanders was a 5-star recruit this last week, offensive lineman, ended up going to Tennessee, by the way, over Ohio State. And Ohio State fans were all excited. Oh, they're going to get David Sanders. Of course they didn't. But
there's got to be an offensive lineman at Marion local.
That's what I was just going to say.
180-pound tackle who wants to come play.
The recruiting services rank these guys, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and the very best are 5 stars. And the fan boards, which I'm on multiple Ohio State fan boards.
Larry Phillips does not sleep, folks. At 3 a.m., he is up talking on Ohio State fan boards. So just so you know.
And they get all excited about these 5 stars, but when it comes to offensive linemen, I think you make a great point. I would rather have 5 3-star Ohio kids who dreamed their whole life of playing in the horseshoe and know that it's going to take 3 years for me to be ready to play at the Big Ten level. They're going to live in the weight room. They're going to develop, and they're going to have that internal passion to play for the Buckeye. I mean, Woody Hayes made a 28-year career out of that. That very thing is recruiting Ohio kids, especially on the offensive line, and turning them into something. Now, that requires an offensive line coach who can develop, no question about it. But let's not get all caught up in losing a 5-star from, IMG in Florida, and pay attention to. I think they could go a little bigger than Marion Local, but
Do you think that idea is dead though? That do you think is it dying with
well,
NIL?
I think you're right, Zach. The idea is dead, but the philosophy shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
I think NIL has changed so many things that they're like, oh, let's just throw $4 million at some 18-year-old kid from IMG, and that'll solve our offensive line problems. And I think that's a very short-sighted way to look at it. If they go back to the roots of the program, and I know this is news to Ryan Day, but Ohio State football is based on running the football, and especially in December.
Yeah.
And so how do you make that happen? You make it happen by developing offensive linemen, and there's no better place than a kid in Ohio who grows up dreaming of playing for Ohio State, and you recruit 3 to 5 of those kids every year that have the potential to develop. I mean, we're sitting probably 8 miles from Bod Penn Miller's home. Bod Penn's for those who don't know, Bod Penn's a receiver recruit who's never caught a high school football pass, but he's going to play receiver at Ohio State, and I have no problem with that. He's a tremendous athlete, great size, great speed. Why not recruit a kid like that who's going to be a project and turn him loose on the offensive line? You're not going to have to worry about this big NIL figure with him. You're not going to have to worry about they're going to have wandering eyes and, I think I could play at Kent State in a year. That's not what these kind of kids are looking
Kent State
like.
in a year.
Enough.
So I'd like to see
Carl.
that philosophy rather than chasing the 5 stars and coming up short on signing day.
Real quick, I wonder do you think with NIL, it hurts the depth of these bigger programs because but in football, my argument's always been injuries are so much a part of the game. And so if you don't have depth, that's part of a flaw in a team.
Right.
You have to have backup linemen, especially. So do you think it's harder for these programs like Ohio State, Georgia, et cetera, to keep that depth when you got guys, I can go play for Indiana for whatever? And
I think it's a fair question. I just don't think I have a hard time feeling sympathy for any of the blue bloods in college football. I mean, they've got it all. More money, more resources.
It actually, I think, is good for the game. I mean, you see teams like Indiana, SMU, Boise State,
it's
Arizona
fun.
State.
Yeah, we're talking about it. It's fun. But no, I like Carl's point. Let's go out and recruit 3 or 4 of the best Ohio high school football offensive linemen and forget about the stars and develop them.
And here's a thought. I don't say Greg Studrawa was the best offensive line coach of all time, but he coached Ohio State's offensive line, I think, from 2016 to 2021. And they were pretty darn good.
Especially very good in the running game.
Yep.
Exactly. And what happens, Ryan Day gets hired in 2019, and he runs Studrawa out the door after the 2021 season. And what has Ohio State not done effectively, consistently since Studrawa left? They don't run the ball very well. He's got $2 bazillion running backs, but guess what? And unless you're playing at Shelby, and you have a great offensive line, running backs don't help you, do they, Hayden?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'd have to go back. It was during a post-game interview earlier this year. Will Howard wore a hat that said "Run the damn ball."
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I don't know if I can say it on your show, Carl, but I mean,
if I had Will Howard's limited ability, I'd say run the damn ball too. All right, sorry, we digress for a minute. Now, if Ohio State does win, they get to go to the Rose Bowl. The way this is set up on New Year's Day, and they'll get to replay Oregon, a team that beat the Buckeyes 32-31 2 months ago.
Great game.
When I would
Great
argue
game.
Ohio State was playing far better 2 months ago.
Absolutely.
Than they have the last ever since then. But what's changed for these two teams since then? And other than the quarterback sliding down as time runs out and not getting a chance to kick a field goal would give the Buckeyes, what do they have to do to win this time?
Well, a lot of Ohio State fans are talking about that play, or the Buckeyes only lost by 1. But if you go back and look at that game, that was really a double-figure game. Oregon having a fumble taken away from Ohio State was clearly a fumble on the first drive that would have set them up deep in Ohio State territory. That Ohio State defense didn't stop them all game. I'm sure they wouldn't have stopped that game. There were Oregon was stopped on 4th and goal at the 1 when they had a receiver wide open. I have no idea what their quarterback Gabriel was looking at on that play. They had an easy touchdown there. I think Oregon was clearly the better team the first time they played. I think Oregon's playing much more efficient football now. They had to score on almost every possession against Penn State, and no problem. They did that Saturday. I think I've heard a lot of people say there's no great team in college football. I disagree with that. Oregon is a great team. I think they're clearly the best team in the country. They're playing the best football in the country right now. And Georgia's the number 2 seed. And I read a report this morning that Georgia's quarterback is not going to play, starting quarterback.
Carson Beck.
Yeah, so if Carson Beck is out, then, you look at the draw, and either Notre Dame or I guess Notre Dame or Penn State looks really good to get to the finals.
My Boise State.
Yeah, Boise State gets the winner of 2 unlikely teams, SMU and Penn State. They were like neither one of them. I mean, SMU choked away the ACC title game, and Penn State, well, they're James Franklin. That's all you need to know about Penn
You know
State.
what? I'm interested to see Boise State's running back. I have not seen him for a whole game, and that young man can play some football. He is
the best player in college football,
and should win the Heisman. I don't think he will, but I'd like to see that.
Ashton Genty.
But Penn State, you look at their draw and they get. I don't know how you get a draw like this when you're the 6th seed. They get SMU, and then if they win that, they get Boise State, and then if they win that, they're going to get probably either Georgia with their 2nd straight quarterback or Notre Dame. Both of those teams they would be favored against in that scenario. And you look up, and James Franklin, who is even worse than Ryan Day at winning big games, is in the national championship game.
They probably won't get out of the first round.
Yeah, and we talk about all this, and SMU will hand them their lunch
money.
Well,
I was curious, Larry. We were talking about Oregon. Do you think if Ohio State handles Tennessee, and Oregon is playing their best football right now, and they are a great team, but 3-week layoff, do you think that's going to could be an advantage for the Buckeyes?
It could be, and like I said earlier, I think Tennessee provides an excellent I shouldn't say warm up. That certainly will not be a warm up, but gets Ohio State in the right mindset, in the right. Okay, this is the level we're going to have to play at. Actually, they have to play at a better level against Oregon to win that game, but. If they can beat Oregon, that's the best team in the field. Ohio State could run the table here. That is the game to me. Urban Meyer said it when they won the national title. He goes, when we beat Alabama, that was a national championship game. I couldn't say that publicly, but if you looked on film for 30 seconds, you knew who the best team was. And I think that's a situation this year for Ohio State. And if they can get past Tennessee, Oregon will be the team. That game could be the one that determines the whole thing.
The thing that disappointed me about Boise State being one of the top 4 seeds and not getting a home game is everybody should get to see that football field.
All the blue turf.
Playing on the blue.
Will they not have a home? Oh, because
it'll be
it'll be a neutral site.
Okay.
Their game will be at the Fiesta Bowl against, I said SMU or Penn State. But, yeah, if you've never seen
that's interesting, too,
that
is that the top 4 teams don't get home
field. And who
field.
was it yesterday? Yeah. Was it Sarkisian at Texas yesterday? Said he didn't think that the top 4 seeds, if you won your conference championship, you should get a bye. I think he wanted everybody to play.
You know what Steve Sarkisian would have said if he'd beaten Georgia?
Yeah.
The teams that win the conference championship should get a bye.
Sure,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know, but I mean, I think it's an interesting point.
I wrote a column for USA Today, I don't know, 10 years ago when this was being discussed, that I thought 8 teams was the correct amount of teams. You just go to a straight 8-team draw, and the quarterfinals begin on New Year's Day. And that's how it's going to be after the first round. That's exactly how it's going to be. You get to use the New Year's Day bowl games as de facto national quarterfinal games. I'm looking forward to it. That will be a full day of football, which is what Carl and I grew up with: the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, and those were the big 4. And somehow the Fiesta Bowl has supplanted the Cotton Bowl, but. New Year's Day is supposed to be about college football, doggone it.
Exactly. Now, this is my only gripe, and I don't care that Alabama didn't get in, Miami didn't get in. You know what? Beat somebody. Don't lose 3 games.
Exactly.
And you get in.
Right, it's still in your control.
And I say the same thing about Ohio State fans complaining about the draw. Come on.
Yeah.
Right.
You just lost arguably suffered the worst loss in the history of the school, and you're complaining about
lucky
your college
to even
football
have another
draw?
game.
Yeah, we're honestly
exactly.
lucky to be in it.
Now, but this is my problem. Army's only loss is to Notre Dame. Army won a conference title.
Right.
It's 11-1. It's not going to get to play in the college football playoff.
And I would argue Army would be a tougher draw than SMU. I would much prefer to play SMU than Army. So they have an argument.
Notre Dame's only loss is to Northern Illinois. It's 11-1. It didn't want a conference title, and it's going to be in the college football playoff.
And a higher seed first-round home game, too.
I mean, I will be cheering mightily on Saturday for my beloved Navy midshipmen to beat Army, which they probably won't do, but Army should be in the playoff. All right.
That'd be great. A service academy in the first college football 12-team playoff. That would be outstanding.
People don't remember the days when Army was the best team in the country.
National powerhouse in the 40s. They were.
Yeah.
Frank Leahy of Notre Dame, that was the one team that could look him in the eye. And those Army teams from the late 40s with Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside, just college football history right there.
Expand the field.
Yep.
No, let's not expand the
32.
field.
I want 32.
I want to shrink
32.
it down to 8.
Oh, Larry.
All right, now, I warned you it was coming. It's time for the elephant in the
open a
room.
can.
Does Ryan Day keep his job if Ohio State doesn't at least get to the national championship game? He's lost 4 in a row to Michigan, including the worst loss in program history to Michigan this season at the Horseshoe. Buckeye backers paid $20 million to field this team. Are they going to be satisfied with a first or second round loss in the college football playoff? Larry, what do you say?
I think he's probably going to keep his job if he beats Tennessee. I don't think Ohio State's going to fire a coach who's won a playoff game this year, which, by the way, Ryan Day's only won one playoff game in his previous 5 years. So it's not like he's had great success in the college football playoff. He has not. But if they get beat by Tennessee after coming on the heels of that unbelievable loss to Michigan, I think he's very much on a hot seat. And one of the things that is probably working against him also is Ohio State has a new athletic director. I hear way too many people say, "Oh, how could you replace Ryan Day? Who else could put up a record like this?" Hey, beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Hey, win the Big Ten. Win more than one playoff game in 5 years, okay? Ryan Day hasn't done any of those things. So to act like it's mission impossible to hire a coach who can win more than one game, and by the way, I would say beating Clemson in the COVID year is really his only signature win at Ohio State. Somehow the narrative has been forwarded that losing a close game to Georgia is somehow a victory for Ryan Day, or losing a close game to Trevor Lawrence in Clemson his first year is somehow a victory for Ryan Day. Those are not victories. Urban Meyer didn't get that kind of benefit of the doubt. Jim Tressel certainly didn't get that kind of benefit of the doubt. Why does Ryan Day get that kind of benefit of the doubt? So if they lose to Tennessee, I think the heat in Columbus will be at boiling point.
I think at that point, and Hayden, I'll let you jump in. What do you think?
Well, I'll take all of Larry's points and I'll twist them and I'll use them to be the toxic
Play devil's
keyboard
advocate.
or couch quarterback or couch general manager here and just say, I think he's at least got to get to a semifinal, honestly, before we even start considering is his job even half secure. There's a deep-rooted part of me that's like, even if he wins a national title, I'm still upset. I think that it's definitely not as frequent anymore, but I think that there's still a portion of the Ohio State fan base that almost values beating Michigan as much as a national championship, and he is absolutely horrendous at doing that. And
I mean, John Cooper won 2-10-1, so there's there's some precedent for not
Keeping
being
a
able
guy
to
who can't beat Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just some of the points Larry made. I mean, he doesn't really have that ultra marquee win, and definitely his record overall is impeccable. It's great. He's got a great winning percentage, but
great against Northwestern.
Right.
Yeah.
But just like
Indiana and
like
Purdue.
everybody else, we have a couple teams, but you got to remember, we have a couple teams that we come pay millions of dollars so that we can beat and add to the, win column. And it's not like the Big Ten has just been this juggernaut conference forever. I mean, beating some of those teams, there were people trying to make the argument, oh, it's hard to go beat Northwestern in Wrigley Field at 11 a.m. local time. No, it's not.
I don't think Northwestern has a $20 million payroll that can look Ryan
And they
Day
only
in the
played
eye.
there because they didn't want to play on their makeshift field along the lake right now. I mean, so I don't know. It's just
What do you mean Ohio State isn't playing Akron or Western Michigan or
so I don't know. I don't want to.
Marshall and
Right. I don't want to be one of those people that pretends that knows what it's like to have to coach a team and make play calls and all that. But as a typical Ohio State fan, I'm I have like very, very minimal patience.
And when you talk about firing a coach, it's a big thing that people don't often acknowledge is like who you're going to replace him with. And so if the right candidate's out there, that could be sometimes good coaches are fired in better situations because there's a better candidate out there. Are there any, Larry, do you have a wish list?
No, well, it's a fair question.
Or is there anybody even available?
It's a fair question, but
because Urban's not coming back.
I've said this, and I can't seem to get any traction with it, but Ohio State coaches don't make the Ohio State football program. It's the other way around. Mm-hmm. Ohio State hired Paul Brown from Massillon High School. He won a national title his second year. Ohio State hired Woody Hayes from Miami of Ohio. He came here with, unless you were in Ohio, I guarantee you didn't know who Woody Hayes was in 1951.
From Newcomerstown.
And he won national titles in 54, 57, 61. 3 titles in his first 10 years. So
Tressel from Youngstown.
Tressel from Youngstown State, 1AA. And when
Penguins.
Andy Geiger hired him, people were like, what in the hell are you doing? And he won a national title his second year here. Ohio State has the kind of resources that are second to none. And they have the biggest alumni base in the world. They take care of their athletes. It's not mission impossible to coach Ohio State football. And to me, it's the top job in the country, number one job in the country. This is the main game in town. If you grew up in Central Ohio, the Browns and the Bengals are a nice diversion on Sunday, but it is Ohio State football is the number one thing, and people pay attention to it like nothing else. It's a year-round obsession. And I think that's been a little bit jarring for Ryan Day, but it's a tremendous opportunity for any coach in the country and to act like, oh, they could never do better than Ryan Day. I mean, that's just insanity.
That guy's
Ryan
from
Day
New
never been a head coach in his life till he got to Ohio State, and look at his record.
And he's from New Hampshire.
Yeah, so
what the hell do you know about football in New Hampshire?
You know, Zach, you asked who are the top candidates. I would start with Dan Lanning at Oregon. He's got the number one team in the country. He beat Ryan Day head-to-head this year, which, granted, if you got a great team, that's not that tough.
A guy from Michigan whose name I'll never remember beat Ohio
Sharon
State.
Moore is 2-0 against Ryan Day. So
Yeah.
to act like it's, who could they possibly get? I mean, seriously? Look at who they've gotten is my response to that.
Well, Vrabel's been the biggest.
Yeah, you know, Mike Vrabel is an Ohio State guy. You know, there's talk that Urban Meyer has floated his name out there. Although the only reason I would not want Urban Meyer is, first of all, I love Urban Meyer. I think he's a tremendous coach, but I would just hate to see him come back and kind of in possibly damage his legacy, which to me is pristine.
Well, his health,
Ohio
too. I don't
State.
think he can
Right.
handle it. It would be detrimental to his physical, mental health.
I think that was a little bit overblown last time. I think he did not have the backing of the athletic department which is unbelievable. He did not have the backing of the president or the athletic director. And now Ryan Day, who has nowhere near the resume that Urban Meyer does, seemingly has the backing of those people, which is, again, the dichotomy of Ohio State athletic department sometimes boggles the mind. But
So was Jim Harbaugh accurate when he said Ryan Day was born on third base
Absolutely.
and acts like he hit a triple?
Absolutely, 100% correct. And that's not a secret. The coaching community's been whispering that for 5 years. And I think that's what led into Ryan Day's play calling, or Chip Kelly, whoever.
Yeah, he went out and got Chip Kelly. This was
Saturday.
supposed to be
Yeah.
Right,
the
maybe he should be
guru.
taking more heat, too.
the amazing offense.
Yeah,
Right.
They have been against teams that aren't any good.
Right. Maybe that's why we have so many wins.
And I think it matters how if they lose to Tennessee. I mean, if they lose to Tennessee, but even if they beat Tennessee and then they lose a game to Oregon in the same way, that's like where you can't get the passing game going and it's an offensive disaster. I think that matters how Ryan Day and this football team would lose a game in the playoff to determine his job status.
Right. Well, because I mean, if you beat Tennessee and then go on and lose to Oregon, what did you accomplish?
Nothing.
Nothing.
You lost to Oregon
You
twice.
lost to Michigan, no conference title, and what?
Yeah, sure.
A home playoff game.
You won
Congrats.
one playoff game,
A
in an
participation
expanded
trophy.
field.
Congratulations.
That goes back to what Kirk Herbstreit said. If the Buckeyes are trailing in the fourth quarter and you get a 3-and-out, that stadium is going to turn on him. That'll make Michigan look like an hors d'oeuvre compared to what's going to happen.
Could you use Will Howard as a scapegoat potentially if he throws like 2 interceptions again, like how he did in the Michigan game?
Only fair
question,
question, Grant. But the only problem with that is Ryan Day's played that card already. We've already seen a quarterback go to Syracuse and, by the way, lead the country in passing this year.
And beat Miami.
He did have a
That was
6
Ryan
interception
Day's
game.
scapegoat last year. And then there was the cheating scandal with a scapegoat before that. And then all the players got sick in 2020. I mean, I'm tired of his excuses. Win the doggone game.
You know what? I'm going back, and this is one of my favorite Woody Hayes quotes. And Ohio State can't do it because they can't block anybody. But you don't get hurt running straight ahead. 3 yards and a cloud of dust offense. I will pound you and pound you until you quit. That's what Ohio
has
State
done
used
to
do.
Ohio State the last 4 years.
Right. I would be fine if we want to do that. We have so much talent and speed and athleticism on the outside, but we go way too much east to west. How many times are we, running these quick RPOs to the outside or these screens that get absolutely blown up by every team we play? We have Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, line up and run the ball.
All right. We're going to have to stop with that, but I do have some time for
we could go on.
Larry, I'm not done with you.
Okay.
I've got time for some Buckeye shots.
Oh, okay. There we go.
I'm going to ask Buckeye historian Larry Phillips some rapid-fire questions. Just your opinions. No right or wrong answers.
Love opinions.
But you only get 5 seconds to answer each one. If you take too long, you'll hear the official Newsman Weekly buzzer. Sounds like that. So,
big budget production.
yeah, it is. We are all high-tech here. Are you ready, Larry?
Go for it.
Best Ohio State football team of all time.
1969, a team that lost to Michigan, by the way.
Most disappointing Ohio State football team of all time.
I would repeat what I just said. Best and most disappointing, both 1969. That team was favored by double digits at Michigan, lost, had just an incredible recruiting class.
I was 8 years old, and my father threw a ceramic ashtray into the TV that day. Best Ohio State football player you've ever seen.
Archie Griffin, and that's an easy one.
Best Ohio State player of all time that nobody really talks about.
Chick Harley.
Best Ohio State coach of all time.
I'm going to say Urban Meyer, although my heart wants to say Woody Hayes.
I'm
Urban
proud
Meyer.
of you for picking an answer past 2000.
Worst Ohio State coach of all time.
Oh, I can't think of his name. He coached in 1948. The guy who coached in 1948 is one of Paul Bixler.
All right.
Paul Bixler.
Now, finally, which is better? Ohio State's best damn band in the land, or the Ohio University Marching 110, the most exciting band in the land?
With Grant Ritchie in the room, I've got to say, and as a salute to my alma mater, the 101 Bones in Athens, Ohio.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. You made it through the Buckeye shots. Hayden, Larry, thanks to both of you for being with us today. And, folks, we're going to have to leave it at that because we're going to run out of time on Richie's SD card, and we'll lose everything. So, we'll be back in a second to put a bow on this week's podcast. But until then, please remember what Mark Twain said. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything.